Secondly, he speaks of lawful rulers here, not tyrants, but of all such as are defined and qualified here, being powers ordained of God, terrors to evil works, ministers of God for good. Yea, but say prelates and their malignant adherents. These are only motives of subjection to all powers, not qualifications of the powers. I answer, they are indeed motives, but such as can be extended to none but to these powers that are so qualified. Thirdly, he speaks of lawful powers indefinitely in the plural number, not specifying any kind or degree of them, as if only kings and emperors were here meant. It cannot be proven that the power of the sword is only in them, neither was there a plurality of kings or emperors at Rome to be subject to. If he meant the Roman emperor, he would have designed him in the singular number. All the reasons of the text agree to inferior judges also, for they are ordained of God. They are called rulers in Scripture, and God's ministers, revengers by office, who judge not for man, but for the Lord. And inferior magistrates also are not to be resisted when doing their duty, 1 Peter 2, verse 13. Yet all will grant, when they go beyond their bounds and turn little tyrants, they may be withstood. Fourthly, he does not speak of Nero, concerning whom it cannot be proven that at this time he had the sovereign power, as the learned Mr. Prynne shows, or if he had, that he was a tyrant at this time, and if he meant him at all, it was only as he was obliged to be by right, nor as he was indeed. All men know, and none condemns the fact of the Senate that resisted Nero at length, without transgressing this precept. Yet I should rather think the Senate is the power that the Apostle applies this text to, if he applied it to any in particular. Fifthly, the subjection here required is the same with the honor in the fifth command, whereof this is an exposition, and is opposite to the contraordinateness here condemned. Now, subjection takes in all the duties we owe to magistrates, and resistance all the contraries forbidden. But unlimited obedience is not here required, so neither unlimited subjection. Thirdly, we may allow passive subjection in some cases, even to tyrants, when the Lord lays on that yoke, and in effect says he will have us to lie under it a while, as he commanded the Jews to be subject to Nebuchadnezzar. Of which passage, adduced to prove subjection to tyrants universally, Buchanan, as above, infers that if all tyrants be to be subjected to, because God by his prophet commanded his people to be subject to one tyrant, then it must be likewise concluded that all tyrants ought to be killed, because Ahab's house was commanded to be destroyed by Jehu. But passive subjection, when people are not in capacity to resist, is necessary. I do not say passive obedience, which is a mere chimera, invented in the brains of such sycophants as would make the world slaves to tyrants. Whosoever suffereth, if he can shun it, is an enemy to his own being. For every natural thing must strive to preserve itself against what annoyeth it, and also he sins against the order of God, who in vain hath ordained so many lawful means for preservation of our being, if we must suffer it to be destroyed, having power to help it. Fourthly, we abhor all war of subjects professedly declared against a lawful king as such, all war against lawful authority founded upon or designed for maintaining principles inconsistent with government, or against policy and piety, yea, all war without authority, yea, when all authority of magistrates, supreme and subordinate, is perverted and abused, contrary to the ends thereof, to the oppressing of the people and overturning of their laws and liberties. People must not suspend their resistance upon the concurrence of men of authority, and forbear the duty in case of necessity, because they have not the peers or nobles to lead them. For if the ground be lawful, the call clear, the necessity cogent, the capacity probable, they that have the law of nature, the law of God, and the fundamental laws of the land on their side, cannot want authority, though they may want parliaments to espouse their quarrel. This is cleared above in head 2. Yet here I shall add, number 1, the people have this privilege of nature to defend themselves and their rights and liberties, as well as peers, and had it before they erected and constituted peers or nobles. There is no distinction or quality in interests of nature, though there be in civil order, but self-defense is not an act of civil order. In such interests, people must not depend upon the priority of their superiors, nor suspend the duties they owe to themselves and their neighbors upon the manuduction of others men's greatnesses. The law of nature allowing self-defense, or the defense of our brethren against unjust violence, addeth no such restriction, that it must only be done by the conduct or concurrence of the nobles or parliaments. Number 2, the people have as great interest to defend their religion as the peers, and more, because they have more souls to care for than they, who are fewer, and to be violented in their consciences, which are as free to them as to the peers, is as insupportable to them. Yea, both are equally concerned to maintain truth and rescue their brethren suffering for it, which are the chief grounds of war. And if the ground of the defense of war be the same with them and without them, what reason can be given, making their resistance in one case lawful and not in the other? Both are alike obliged to concur, and both are equally obnoxious to God's threatened judgments for suffering religion to be ruined and not relieving and rescuing innocence. It will be but a poor excuse for people to plead that they had no peers to head them. What if both king and nobles turn enemies to religion, as they are at this day? Shall people do nothing for the defense of it then? Many times the Lord hath begun a work of reformation by foolish things, and hath made the least of the flock to draw them out. Jeremiah 49 verse 2, and Jeremiah 50 verse 45. And did not think fit to begin with nobles, but began it when powers and peers were in oppression to it. And when he blessed it so at length as to engage the public representatives to own it, what was done by private persons before, they never condemned. Third, the people are injured without the nobles, therefore they may resist without them, if they be able. For there can be no argument adduced to make it unlawful to do it with them. Fourth, it is true the nobles are obliged beyond others, and have authority more than others to concur, but separately they cannot act as representatives judicially. They have a magistrical power, but limited to their particular precincts, where they have interest, and cannot extend it beyond these bounds. And so if they should concur, they are still in the capacity of subjects, for out of a parliamentary capacity they are not representatives. Fifth, all the power they can have is cumulative, not privative. For the worst condition of a ruler ought not to be by procuring. Why then shall the representatives, betraying their trust, wrong the cause of the people, whose trustees they are? Nay, if it were not lawful for people to defend their religion, lives, and liberties without the concurrence of parliaments, then their case should be worse with them than without them. For they have done it before they had them, and so they had better be without them still. Sixth, people may defend themselves against the tyranny of a parliament, or primores, or nobles. Therefore, they may do it without them. For if it be lawful to resist them, it is lawful to waive them when they are in a conspiracy with the king against them. Number 5. We disallow all war without real undeclinable necessity, and great and grievous wrongs sustained, and do not maintain it is to be declared or undertaken upon supposed grounds or pretended causes. And so the question is impertinently stated by our adversaries, whether or not it be lawful for subjects or a party of them, when they think themselves injured, or to be in a capacity to resist or oppose the supreme power of a nation. For the question is not if when they think themselves injured they may resist, but when the injuries are real, neither is it every reality of injuries will justify their resistance, but when their dearest and nearest liberties are invaded, especially when such an invasion is made as threatens ineluctable subversion of them. Next, we do not say that a party's esteeming themselves in a capacity, or their being really in a capacity, doth make resistance a duty, except all alike they have a call as well as a capacity, which requires real necessity, and a right to the action, and the things contended for to be real and legal rights, really and illegally encroached upon. Their capacity gives them only a conveniency to go about the duty that is previously lawful upon a moral ground. No man needs to say, who shall be judge, the magistrate or people? For first, all who have eyes in their head may judge whether the sun shine or not, and all who have common sense may judge in this case. For when it comes to a necessity of resistance, it is to be supposed that the grievances complained of, and sought to be redressed by arms, are not hid, but manifest. They cannot be so with any party only pretending their suffering wrong. Number 2. There is no need of the formality of a judge in things evident to nature's eye, as grassant tyranny, undermining and overturning religion and liberty must be. Nature, in the acts of necessitated resistance, in such a case, is judge, party, accuser, witness, and all. Neither is it an act of judgment for people to defend their own. Defense is no act of jurisdiction, but a privilege of nature. Hence these common sayings, all laws permit force to be repelled by force, and the law of nature allows self-defense. The defense of life is necessary and flows from the law of nature. Third, be judge who will. The tyrant cannot be judge in the case, for in these tyrannical acts that force the people to that resistance, he cannot be acknowledged as king, and therefore no judge. For it is supposed the judge is absent when he is the party that does the wrong, and he that does the wrong, as such, is inferior to the innocent. Fourth, let God be judge, and all the world, taking cognizance of the evidence of their respective manifestos in the state of their cause. Number 6. We condemn rising to revenge private injuries, whereby the land may be involved in blood, for some petty wrongs done to some persons, great or small, and abhor revengeful usurping of the magistrate's sword to avenge ourselves for personal injuries, as David's killing of Saul would have been in 1 Samuel 24, verses 10 and 12, and 13, as well as 1 Samuel, verse 26, verses 9 and 10. To object, which, in this case, were very impertinent, for it would have been an act of offense and a remote defense. If Saul had been immediately assaulting him, it could not be denied to be lawful, and it would have been an act of private revenge for a personal injury and a sinful preventing of God's promise of David's succession by a scandalous assassination. But it is clear, then David was resisting him, and that is enough for us. And he supposes he might descend into battle and perish, 1 Samuel 26, verse 10, not excluding, but that he might perish in battle against himself resisting him. We are commanded indeed not to resist evil, but whosoever shall smite us on the one cheek, to turn to him the other also, Matthew 5, verse 39, and to recompense to no man evil for evil. Romans 12, verse 17. But this doth not condemn self-defense or resisting tyrants violently, endangering our lives, laws, religion, and liberties, but only resistance by way of private revenge and retaliation, and enjoying patience when the clear call and dispensation do inevitably call unto suffering, but not to give way to all violence and sacrilege, to the subverting of religion and righteousness. These texts do no more condemn private persons retaliating the magistrate than magistrates retaliating private persons, unless magistrates be exempted from this precept, and consequently be not among Christ's followers. Yea, they do no more forbid private persons to resist the unjust violence of magistrates than to resist the unjust violence of private persons. That objection from our Lord's reproving Peter, Matthew 26, verse 52. Put up thy sword, for all they that take the sword shall perish by the sword, hath no weight here. For this condemns only making use of the sword, either by way of private revenge or usurping the use of it without authority, and so condemns all tyrants, which private subjects do not want to defend themselves, their religion and liberty, or using it without necessity, which was not in Peter's case, because both Christ was able to defend himself, and because he was willing to deliver up himself, Poole's synopsis, critic in locum. Christ could easily have defended himself, but he would not, and therefore there was no necessity for Peter's rashness. It condemns also a rash precipitating and preventing the call of God to acts of resistance, but otherwise it is plain it was not Peter's fault to defend his master, but a necessary duty. The reason our Lord gives for that inhibition at that time was twofold, one expressed in Matthew 26, verse 52, for they that take the sword, etc., which do not belong to Peter, as if Peter were hereby threatened. But to those that were coming to take Christ, they usurped the sword of the tyrannical violence, and therefore are threatened with destruction by the sword of the Romans. So is that combination to be understood of Antichrist and the tyrants that serve him. Revelation 13, verse 13. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword, which is a terrible word against persecutors. The reason is John 18, verse 11. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink? Which clearly refels that objection to Christ's non-resistance, to which it is answered that suffering was the end of his voluntary suscepted humiliation and his errand to the world, appointed by the Father and undertaken by himself, which is not our practice, though it be true that even in his sufferings he left us an ensample that we should follow his steps, 1 Peter 2:21. In many things, as he was a martyr, his sufferings were the purest rule and example for us to follow, both for the matter and frame of spirit, submission, patience, constancy, meekness, etc., but not as he was our sponsor, and after the same manner, for then it were unlawful for us to flee as well as to resist, because he would not flee at that time.